Hey there, everybody. My name's Ed Trevors. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Gway. Gway, thank you for being here. I am wearing my Every Child Matters t-shirt. Well, I think I've got 3 or 4 of them now. People very generously keep sending them my way. Tomorrow here in Canada, so I'm recording this on the 29th of September. On the 30th of September, we commemorate the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, which is, well, it's a day where we remember and we consider, we contemplate, we commemorate the national tragedy that was the residential school system, which ran for well over a century here in Canada, where Indigenous children, in an effort to kill the Indian, train the child, something like that, where basically they were going to take kids, put them in these, what they called residential schools, industrial schools, and they would diligently work to destroy that child's cultural understandings. It was about trying to assimilate, indoctrinate the Indigenous communities here in Canada into a white man, into the white man life. That was the goal. We got tired of hoping that the Indigenous people would just see how spectacular it is to be a white guy and want nothing but that. We get tired of waiting for them to see the error of their ways. We got tired of waiting for them to abandon their culture and to adopt our own, that we decided to take a more genocidal approach to it, a cultural genocide. And that's ultimately what it was. It was about destroying the culture. And this isn't revisionist history. We're going to take a look at Actually, we're going to take a look at it right now. This is a quote from Canada's first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald. "When the school is on the reserve, the child lives with the parents, who are savages. And though he may learn to read and write, his habits and training mode of thought are Indian. He is simply a savage who can read and write. It has been strongly impressed upon myself as head of the department that Indian children should be withdrawn as much as possible from the parental influence. And the only way to do that would be to put them in central training industrial schools, where they will acquire the habits and modes of thought of the white man." There it is. 1879 that was written. John A. Macdonald was no longer the Prime Minister. He was now the head of, I think the department was called Indian Affairs. And this was part of his pitch to solve what was literally considered the Indian problem here in Canada. Sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? It sounds eerily familiar when we put a people, when we describe a people as a problem. Good things rarely happen after that. The Indian problem led to thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children being removed from their communities, removed from their families, removed from their communities, and sent to a school run by white people, including the church, by the way. The church had a large part of this. The Roman Catholic Church, the United Church of Canada, and my own Anglican Church of Canada all played a very, very significant role in this. As a matter of fact, the teaching of religion was considered it was considered incredibly important for this to happen. We must indoctrinate them with our ways, our modes of thought, with the education and with our religion. If we're going to train the Indian out of them, then we have to bring God into it as well. And so the church has got heavily involved. And anyway, we won't get into all my suspicions, but the bottom line is those residential schools weren't just damaging because it removed kids from their cultures. They were also incredibly damaging because of literally the harm and the abuse that these children suffered. It's for this reason. Whenever I think about the residential schools and I think about some of the things that are happening in our world today, right? I think, oh, geez, we just did not learn the lesson. Because we stand up and what do? We start talking about how our culture is under attack. Our values are under attack. I honestly, I don't really understand what that means. I genuinely do not understand what that means. As a Christian, I don't understand what it means when we say our values and our culture is under attack. Immigrants are coming into our country. Oh no, our values and our cultures are our way of life. Our way of life is under attack. What? I mean, when we begin thinking along this way, we begin thinking that ours is the right, ours is the superior, ours is the best, yay, rah, our team. And we begin seeing others as they are somehow less than us. We begin seeing others that they are somehow deficient, somehow inadequate, evil even, right? We begin seeing them as a danger to what we have. We begin seeing their ways as a danger to our ways. We begin seeing their understandings as a danger to our understandings. And again, historically speaking, that never ends well. The threatened often end up doing the most obscene, the most evil, the most hateful, heinous things. In Canada's case, beginning in the 1800s, with the opening of those residential schools and what is basically the kidnapping of children, because they didn't have a choice. As a matter of fact, there were penalties if they didn't. If the children of families didn't go, there were penalties. With the opening of those schools was the beginning of an incredible terror, an incredibly well thought out tragedy. We didn't do it by mistake, and it cannot say that enough. We can never whitewash this. We have the words of the architects. This was incredibly thought out. It was a cultural genocide. It was about destroying the culture of the indigenous. And I honestly, I can't look at it and say, well, what was it? What was it about indigenous people? What was it about their values that were so threatening to ours? What was it about? Why were we so insecure in our ways? Why were we so insecure in our thoughts? Why were we so insecure in our values that we had to destroy a way of life? We had to destroy the way of life of an entire people group. I look at it and I just see such cowardice, and again, from the place of the church, a completely unchristian cowardice, a completely unchristian insecurity and sense of inadequacy. Absolutely nowhere does Jesus or Paul or any of the other authors of the New Testament say to us, you must be on the lookout because somebody might teach you something that will move differently than in your cultural understandings. Yes, we're supposed to be on the lookout for a faith or for an ideology or for an idolatry that we may indeed be enticed to join. Absolutely, we're supposed to be on guard for those false teachers and for those false religions, right? Those false religions that would tell us that we are superior, yay us. Those false religions that would tell us that white guys are the best. Those false religions that would tell us that our customs and our values are the things that matter most to God. Yeah, we're supposed to be on guard for that. And we're supposed to be on guard for those thoughts and for those ideas and for those plans, those incredibly well thought out plans that would tell us we are to be the ones who kill another culture. Those kinds of idolatry, that's what we're supposed to be on guard for. But nowhere does Jesus tell us that our culture matters at all. Nowhere does Jesus tell us that in order to be a true Christian, you must adopt a very, very, very particular culture, a very particular a very particular way of life. Apart from love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and body, love your neighbor as yourself, and let your life reflect those two values, those two principles. We remember in Canada the horror of the residential school system. We remember the words of the survivors. We remember the stories. We remember their stories of what it was like to be there. We remember their stories of what it was like to be ripped from their families, not just physically, but when they went home and they couldn't remember how to speak their language. They couldn't remember the ways that their grandparents had taught. In Canada, we'll remember this. And we mustn't forget, because this lesson from our history, this tragic lesson from our history, this horrific action that we as a nation undertook, these lessons are incredibly valuable for us today as well. Incredibly valuable for us today as well. Whenever we begin believing that another group is somehow insufficient, somehow inadequate, somehow dangerous, that their ways of life, their values are somehow dangerous, we must be on guard for that. That isn't to say adopt everything. No, absolutely not. It is to say that Canada is a kaleidoscope. Canada is a mosaic. We are not a melting pot. We are a mosaic where every face, regardless of beauty, regardless of color, regardless of dress, every Canadian face is part of this beautiful, wonderful masterpiece, this wonderful, beautiful work of art. We all have value. We all have something to share. We all have room to grow and room to learn. We have a responsibility to be humble enough to accept this about ourselves and about others. What happened to our Indigenous brothers and sisters, to the Indigenous communities of Canada, must never be repeated. It must never happen again. We would be the worst of fools. The worst of fools to close our ears and our eyes to this tragedy. We'd just be the worst people if we didn't learn and we allowed this to happen to others? What were we so afraid of? What were we so afraid of that we had to destroy a culture? What were we so afraid of that we had to destroy hundreds of cultures? How truly unchristian of us. Amen.